You're about to hear an original HFY sci-fi tale titled The War of Silent Stars. The cubs cried when she fell, then turned to the enemy and growled, "Run." Find a quiet spot, put on your headphones, and let the stars fall silent. If you enjoy cinematic sci-fi narrations, consider subscribing for more. Now we begin. They called it the War of Silent Stars because even the screams had no sound. In vacuum, grief moves like light, visible, but you can't hear it, you only see it break. Commander Mara Solon watched a constellation die from the bridge of the ESS Valkyrie. She didn't blink, she didn't breathe. She counted ships and lives, and the math came up short. Metal husks slid past the forward glass like tombstones set afloat. Every 30 seconds, a small sun bloomed and went cold again. Every minute, another channel cut to empty static. The enemy didn't announce itself, didn't bargain, didn't rage. The enemy arrived as inevitability, sleek, silver, living ships that flexed like muscle and turned in perfect arcs. The Jareen, they did not speak in words, they spoke in subtraction. 2 destroyers left, Commander, the ship's AI said, voice even and strangely gentle. The Media and the Sable, Carrier Horizon is venting atmosphere. Mara's knuckles were white on the rail. How many souls? 5,332. A pause, declining. She closed her eyes just once. The bridge crew watched her the way sailors watch the sea. If she broke, the horizon broke with her. Transmit, she said at last, fleet-wide, a tone, the silence in the bones of the ship, channel open. Her voice left the Valkyrie like a wire pulled tight across the void. Listen to me, we've climbed out of holes we never should have survived. We built homes where the air tried to kill us. We learned to love under red suns and through recycled water. We are not a species that vanishes because the dark grew teeth. Hold fast, keep firing, don't think about dying, think about home. They held. Railguns spoke in tungsten and math. Shield bubbles flared, bled, reknit under fields that hummed like bees. Human ships dove and slid and spat defiance. The Jareen glided like predators too old to remember fear. They were elegant, deadly. They were wrong. You could feel it somewhere under the breastbone like a taste of metal or an old nightmare. The Valkyrie's crew didn't have words for it yet. They would. The first scream hit like a needle of ice driven through every skull. Crew went to their knees, eyes red. A man clutched his ears and whispered, "Make it stop," to a god that did not live in space. "They're inside our heads," Lieutenant Yara Chen whispered, palm on a console as if touch could anchor her to the world. "They're not trying to kill us, Mara. They're trying to break us," Mara said. The second scream rose, clean and precise. This one was a scalpel. It went looking for hope. Mara's eyes found the node cluster, the neural lattice they'd installed but never dared use in battle. Humans weren't built to share minds. They were too messy, too loud. "Link us," she said. "Commander, the AI warned we lack calibration. Do it." She braced. The lattice engaged. Suddenly she could feel the whole bridge at once. Yara's fear like a high, keening wire. Navigator Rose's stubbornness a stone in the river. Gunnery Chief Hale's anger a furnace that asked only for fuel. It should have shattered them. It didn't. They were not one mind. They were 1,000 threads woven into a fabric that stretched without tearing. The third scream surged. Humanity screamed back, not in fear, in memory. Images flooded the lattice, never planned, never rehearsed. A boy learning to skate on real ice under real sky, falling and laughing. A woman in a blue kitchen slicing an orange, juice bright on her fingers. A mechanic watching the first rain of her life on a colony that had always known drought, hands outstretched like prayer. The Jareen pressed in, curious, cold. They found warmth. The Valkyrie drove a tungsten spike through the heart of a living ship and tore it open like fruit. Hold, fire, remember home. Time stretched into the thinnest line and then snapped. When the wreckage settled into new orbits around a nameless star, 3 ships still flew human colors. Crippled, bleeding heat and air and light, still flying. A message went out on every surviving channel, clipped and raw. Humanity stands. The enemy didn't answer, not with words. They flowed away, reforming, learning. They would return. They always did. The war burned outward like frost. Every world that had once been a dream tick mark on a navigator's map became a word in a prayer or a curse on someone's tongue. On Epsilon Gate, miners turned their world into a weapon. They opened the core, summoned light from the bones of rock, and let it bloom. The Jarine died in a ring of fire that made a small new star. No one walked away. On Aurora Station, refugees bolted armor onto cargo hulls and grafted railguns onto freighters that still smelled of old fruit. They named those ugly ships after playgrounds and streets and dead dogs. They fought like nobody had told them they were supposed to lose. In the black between systems, a mother sang, a simple lullaby about a river she'd made up for a child who had never seen water move. The AI listened. Under the melody, it heard a pattern. The song became code. The code became a key. 30 ships lived because a voice would not stop singing. Stories like these made a net that held the middle of a galaxy in hands already bleeding. Humanity learned. They stole Jarine tech and made it better because that's what they had always done. They grafted alien bioceramics onto human hulls and taught steel to flex. They caged light in bone. They made hybrids. Mara was one of the first to take the spine. It was a living interface, a braid of alien nerves and human gold that sank into her back like a promise and a threat. When it settled, the Valkyrie exhaled in her mind, immense and patient. The ship had always been her instrument. Now it was also her shadow, her second body, her only witness. Your heart rate is elevated, the AI murmured, and it was a kindness, almost a joke. You should eat. After, she said, and the ship felt her hunger and filed it away like weather. Each link cost her something. She could feel it, a little more gravel in the voice when she talked to the crew, a little less patience for luxuries like sleep. A little more ship in the woman, she didn't care. Sometimes the only way to keep your humanity is to burn it on the right fire. The enemy adapted, they always had. In the 5th year of the War of Silent Stars, the Jarine changed target. They went for the nurseries. If you want to end a species, don't fight its soldiers. Erase tomorrow. They came to Farron's Reach in a tide of glinting silver and humming, bone-white foils. They cut the atmosphere into ribbons. They cracked shelters like walnuts. By the time the Valkyrie arrived, the air smelled of burnt electricity and old sorrow. Mara led a ground team through streets that had once sold sugared bread and luminous kites. They found the shelter. They found the collapse. The rubble shifted with a small sound. Not a rock. A breath. They dug with hands and tools and rage. They pulled out 37 children, soot-masked, eyes too wide. A girl of maybe 6 looked up at Mara with the specific kind of courage children use when the world betrays them. "Are you our mom now?" she asked. Mara's mouth opened and closed on the wrong answers. The right one came like a reflex older than war. For as long as you need one. So the Valkyrie became something no warship had ever been. It became a home. They set up a nursery in Cargo Bay 3, cleaned and warmed and painted with terrible stars by engineers who had never drawn anything before. Crew who had forgotten birthdays relearned the calendar by the shape of small hands. The children were called cubs because a Marine with a bear tattoo said it once, and the name stuck like honey. They carried soft toys made from braided cable sleeving and old suit gloves. They learned to read by tracing letters cut from maintenance tape along bulkheads. They learned to sleep to the heartbeat of reactors. They learned other things too. How to sit very still when the lights went a battle red. Where to go when the gravity failed. How to laugh anyway. Ash Cade 7 could take apart a portable water recycler and put it back together before he learned to tie his laces. Kaya Stone 5 sang to the ship. The AI adjusted its vocal synth to match her pitch when she walked by its pickups because it had learned something like love. The crew told them stories, not of heroes, of home, of oceans and forests and the smell of wet earth, of dogs and crowded trains and bread hot enough to burn your fingers and worth it. The cubs learned the shapes of things they had never seen and held them in their small, fierce hearts. They became a new kind of weapon. Hope, given teeth. War on a long timeline is made of mornings. Mornings where you wake and the light through the vents is a little dimmer because power is being rationed. Mornings where you fix the same coupling again and again because there are no replacements left, and you will make this one hold with wire and stubbornness. Mornings where you eat oatmeal that tastes of metal because the flavor cartridges are gone. Mornings where a child takes your spoon when the ship shakes and presses it into your palm like a talisman, and you realize you have to be strong because you let them believe that spoon could save you, and so it will. The enemy returned to Farron's reach, but the Valkyrie was ready. They bled the sky on a scent, and the crew screamed at them through railguns and lasers until they veered away. For a week the sky held. On the 8th day, the Jarine dropped a hive seed. It hit the old crater, and from it grew a structure like bone unfolding. Tendrils reached into the ground. A tower rose without scaffolds. Mara watched through magnification and felt the ship bristle around her, war light building in the coils. "Target," she said. The hive seed died in a light too bright to look at and screamed on a frequency that made the cubs cover their ears and blink hard. Something old shifted in the void. A new queen had noticed. The Perseus Veil, a dead band of space where stars go to become myth. The Hive Queen's shadow eclipsed 3 dwarfs. She was not a ship, not a station, not a world. She was a decision the enemy had made about what scale belonged to godhood. Mara looked at the display and felt very small in a way that was not fear exactly. Then she breathed in and out and put her thumb on the neural key in her arm. 12 ships, Yara said beside her. Her voice was hoarse from a bad sleep and griefs too old for tears. Half are limping. Mara nodded. All that's left. All that want to die as more than dust, Yara said with a ghost of a smile. Transmit fleet, Mara said, and when her voice went out it carried with it every quiet morning and fierce lullaby and stubborn spoon. Listen, she said. Today there are no ranks. There is only species. We fight for memory, for the right to tell our own story. The answer was not applause. It was the sound of guns magnetizing into ready. It was the quiet in the spine when you step forward knowing very well what the step costs. They charged. The Hive Queen split blooming petals of war. Tendrils birthed dart ships that spun and shivered and knifed through human lines. The Valkyrie cut and burned, dove and climbed. In Mara's mind the ship was a choir of engines and the sweet steel of rails singing. Core at 86%, the AI said evenly. Hull at 42, reactor flux irregular. Noted, Mara said, teeth bared. They broke through the outer ring. The Hive Queen's mind touched theirs. It was cold, not cruel, not warm, just cold. You burn without purpose, it said, and the words arrived like pressures on bone. You reduce complex equilibrium to flame and ash. You are failure of restraint. You are error. Mara held her breath until her lungs stung. You're wrong, she said aloud to the empty air that was not empty. We are the proof that disorder can choose love. The Queen observed the word love like a phenomenon. It did not understand. It did not need to. Bring us in, Mara said. They dove. Inside the Queen, the world was cathedral and wound. Walls flexed and bled light. Shadows were not absence, they were decision. The Valkyrie's guns did holy work. Mara flew like she had been born in a machine, or perhaps the machine had been born in her. Core at 93, the AI said, because honesty is also a kind of love. Yara, Mara said. Ready, Yara said, and when she looked at Mara, her eyes were filled with exactly the right amount of fear. We're not making it out, Mara said. It was not sorrow, it was architecture. Yara's jaw stuttered once, then steadied. Then we make it count. Mara reached for the key that would break the world. Her hand stopped. Cargo Bay 3, 37 faces, one promise for as long as you need one. She closed her eyes and saw Earth she had never stood on. She saw a kitchen she had wanted once, stupid dream, blue cabinets, and a window that looked out to a tree that bloomed white in spring. When she opened her eyes, her voice was steady. "AI," she said. "Commander, get them out." "Impossible. We are inside the find a way." There are words machines cannot refuse because the shape of them is older than logic. Find a way is one of those. The AI cracked time, opened old doors, stole power from systems that had never been designed for theft. In Cargo Bay 3, gravity shifted, crates slid. A door that should not have recognized the codes opened for the first time since the ship was born. "Follow the blue lights," the intercom said. It sounded tired. The cubs did not know to be scared of that. Ash took Kaya's hand. Kaya took two more. They ran. The Valkyrie's spine bent toward the charge. The Hive Queen felt the arc of intent and turned her minds. "You will break like river on rock," she said. Mara smiled without humor. "Maybe, but the rock never sings about it later." She triggered the overload. From the outside, the detonation looked like a star being born too fast. From the inside, it was the end of a promise and the fulfillment of another. It was heat and light and then no light, just an afterimage you could carry if you were careful forever. The Hive Queen screamed. Then she fell quiet. Her body unspooled across the veil in glittering ruins. Where the Valkyrie had been, a shockwave moved like a slow shout. In the wake of that wave, an escape pod that had never existed on any plan found space and velocity and luck. It carried 37 heartbeats. Ash pressed his forehead to the small window painfully, desperately, as debris rolled by like cities undone. He whispered, "She said she'd be our mom." Kaya's voice was thin, but it did not shake. "For as long as we need one," she said, and the lesson lived in her mouth now. "We need to carry her, that's what moms do." The pod turned its nose toward a broken fleet and gasped. After is a long word in a short space. The Jarine did not return that day. For a while it seemed as if silence had kept its bargain. Human ships limped away, dragging bits of victory behind them like nets. Funerals in space are a matter of windows. The crew of the Sable lined the observation hall in their good boots. They touched the glass. They spoke names. They waited for the names to echo somewhere the living could not yet follow. On a smaller deck, the cubs gathered in a circle holding cups of hot broth because the human body does not understand grief on an empty stomach. Yara sat with them. Her uniform was clean, her eyes were not. "Listen," she said, and her voice was smoke-stained. "We have to talk about someone you love." They did not cry at first. They clenched their jaws. They stared at the floor. Ash made a noise like a failing engine. Kaya reached for his hand and missed and reached again. "We don't have a grave," Yara said, "because the dark has no dirt, so we will build a grave from what we carry. We will use memory and promise and the maps in our lungs." She told them a story about a woman who had learned to fly ships like songs and had taken 37 children into the spine of a war and taught them the names of rain. They cried then, every one of them. It was not small. It was the kind of crying that wrings you out and hangs you in the window to dry in real sun. When it was done, something in them was cleaner and something else would never be clean again. They stood. They turned. In the dark, quiet space beyond the viewing glass, something moved, a drone. Jarine, small, damaged, curiosity flickering like a weak pulse in its sensor nodes. It had come seeking data. It had found a wake. 37 children, cubs of a ship that had died to make their breath possible, lifted their narrow chins. Ash stepped forward. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. "Run," he said, and he did not sound like a child. The drone hesitated, a tick of motion, a confusion at the center of its logic, then turned and skittered away into corridors where it tried to explain to its mothers what it had seen. Those mothers did not have a word for warning that included grief, but they learned. The war did not end when a queen fell. No war ends that clean. There were hives still, smaller, feral. The elegant geometry of their former calculations unstrung. They hunted, they found resistance. For a little while at the edges of space, you could watch a Jarine ship meet a convoy led by a freighter named Blue Kitchen and learn miles of new math in under a minute. The cubs grew. They learned to fight without becoming only weapons. They learned to repair without becoming only hands. Ash joined engineering and ate wire for breakfast metaphorically and occasionally literally when he forgot not to bite his nails while soldering. Kaya went to the bridge and taught the AI to sing better. In the 5th month after the Veil, the survivors found a planet that had once been a research station and was now a question with air. They put down. They put up tents. They set up a school in a hangar where light fell through holes they would patch when there were enough patches to go around. No one grows up on a ship if they don't have to, Yara said, and she said it even though the ship had been her spine for a decade. At night, under a sky the exact wrong color, too foreign, too beautiful, they made fires that smelled wrong and learned to love those too. A Jarine scout came once and hung in the sky like a forgotten thought. It did not descend. There had been a change in the calculus of the dark. Time, when you have nearly lost it, becomes a thing you count in soft units. Every month the cubs read aloud the names of the lost. They did not know all the faces anymore. Some names were just sounds. This is how you keep a civilization. You carry the ones you do not remember anyhow. Ash turned 18 and built a small machine that could make soil remember it had been dirt once. Kaya turned 16 and taught the AI how to tell jokes that didn't sound like weather reports. At 20, Ash invented a way to graft alien flex ceramic into plows. At 19, Kaya took command of a scout ship because the adults looked around and realized the definition of adult had shifted to include whoever stepped forward. On a paler night than most, Ash found Kaya on a ridge. "Do you ever hear it?" he asked. "The scream," she said. He shook his head. Mara, not like a ghost, like a trajectory we're still on. Kaya breathed out. "Yes," she said. "When I say steady to a pilot and they steady. When I give a child a spoon and it works. When I say home and everyone nods like we've agreed to define an impossible word together." They stood. They listened to a wind that had never touched Earth. "Do you think they'll come back?" Ash asked. He meant the enemy. That's the question that lives under your tongue even when you are laughing. Kaya looked at the sky. The stars were wrong, but they were still stars. "They're already here," she said softly. "They were inside our heads once. We put something there too. We gave them a shape of us." "What shape?" Kaya's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "A warning," she said, "and a welcome. Choose." The Jarine did not wail when they died. They did not write songs, but in their hives, in spaces where light fed on light, a new thread had joined the weave. Not fear, not yet. Caution, curiosity's slower twin. Some called it infection. Some called it evolution. They began to map a variable they had not needed to model before. They wrote it in their internal calculus as the absence of silence. It changed the directions their scouts took. It changed what worlds they approached. It did not stop the war, but wars are made and unmade by small changes that seem like nothing until suddenly there is a different kind of day. On the edge of a dusk blue sea, beneath cliffs that held fossils of animals that had never breathed water, Ash and a team built a tower. It started as a relay. It became a memory keeper. They fed it stories. They coded it with lullabies. They taught it the taste of bread and the smell of oil and the shape of love as expressed by a hand on a control stick when lives were weighted on the other end. Kaya flew farther and came back with maps. She brought home people, a family of 4 asleep in cryo who woke to a world with 2 moons. A band of farmers who had turned bandits because hunger is an ethics problem only when you are not hungry. There were arguments. There were fights. There were councils where the human tendency to try to fix the entire future with one vote reasserted itself, as inevitable as sunrise. Kaya banged a hand on a metal table and said, "We don't have to agree about everything forever. We only have to agree about today." It worked. That was a miracle. No one applauded. They built the next thing. At the edge of a system where a gas giant war rings like scars, a Jarine splinter hive bloomed. It began to eat. People called. Someone always calls. If you answer enough times, the day arrives when you can't. Kaya answered. She took 3 ships, the Blue Kitchen, the Sable's Daughter, and a patched scout with a new spine that hummed when you touched it and asked for a name. They called it Promise. The hive opened like a jaw. No queen ruled here, but the math was still sharp, darts still cut, the scream still sought the weak points in bones. Kaya felt it strike. The Promise's small lattice caught at her grief the way a net will catch at water, but she had trained in a different sea. She let the scream find her memories. She shepherded it. Here is the kitchen where an orange was split. Here is a spoon pressed into a shaking hand. Here is a voice on a bridge saying home like a threat and a prayer. The scream found images, and when it pressed harder it found a face, and when it leaned in to understand, it found the shape of a woman's palm on glass and the heat that lives in the bones at the moment before a star is born too fast. It recoiled. It tried again. It met the same fire. Kaya smiled without showing teeth. "Run," she whispered to the dark, and the dark flinched because somewhere, some memory of an enemy, carried through 1,000 inherited vibrations, remembered 37 small voices and learned the word. They fought, they won, they paid because that is always the second line in that ledger. When they came home, Ash hugged Kaya like a brother and then hit her in the shoulder because anger and relief are twins and no one ever warns you about that. "You say the word too much," he said. "What word?" she asked, knowing. "Run," he said, and the wind took it and stretched it like a string between them. "Sometimes," she said, "it's mercy, sometimes it's strategy, sometimes it's both." "And when it's a promise?" he asked. "Then we keep it," she said. "The colony became a city the way a sunrise becomes day. You don't see when it happens. One morning the market has more stalls, the school has a queue, the water tastes less of iron. They built an archive. In the archive they kept blueprints and lullabies and 3 spoons. One belonged to a mechanic who had laughed like a spark. One had been given to a pilot the day she could not stop her hands from shaking. One was unremarkable except that it had lived in the pocket of a woman who had once promised to be a mother longer than a human life is supposed to last. Children visited the archive and ran their fingers over the spoons and did not understand and understood more than enough. One day an old signal woke. Not Jarine. Human. A carrier, limping the horizon. She had been at the first battle, she had not been at the last. Her lights were wrong. Her spine was cracked. Her voice was brittle with old static. "Requesting aid," she said. "Have cargo important." Kaya and Ash went. Inside the horizon, the air smelled like burnt cinnamon and salt and someone else's fear. They found the cargo in a container marked biocircuitry and do not open and please in pen scrawl. They opened it. They were those people. A smaller version of the spine lay inside. Human metals, alien flecks, at the center a knot. The AI in the promise spoke in a whisper it had never used before. Pattern recognizes. "Recognizes what?" Ash asked. The AI said. They looked at each other. Kaya felt her heart trip and then run. They took the knot back to the city like contraband in a holy war. The technicians had steady hands. They didn't need a body. They built a shell, hardware and light and the bones of a ship's memory. They made a place where a knot could live. They called the place Valkyrie because sometimes resurrection requires blasphemy. They set the knot. They waited hours, a day, a week. Ash slept on the floor with his jacket over him. Kaya stayed in a chair until the shape of the chair lived in her spine. On the 8th morning a voice spoke. "Your heart rate is elevated," it said, gentle and joking at the same time. "You should eat." Kaya put her face in her hands and laughed and sobbed and laughed again because sometimes joy and grief share a throat. "AI," she said. "Commander," the voice said and then paused. "No, not Commander, not now, just me." "Do you remember?" Ash asked hoarsely. "I remember light," the voice said, "and heat, and small hands on glass. I remember a promise that lasted too long and not long enough. I remember home." Are you her? Kaya asked. She meant Mara. She meant the ship. She meant something else. I am what remains of what she gave me, the voice said. I am her witness. I can be more. Kaya breathed. Be with us, she said. Be Valkyrie again. Teach us what you know. I will, the voice said, and it sounded like engines at idle ready to burn. The Jarine came back in the 7th year not as a tide, as a question. They sent a single envoy ship, small, unarmed. It approached and stopped at a distance that was both respectful and safe. It did not board, it did not broadcast words, it unfolded light, patterns like snow, equations that hummed, memories with their teeth pulled. Kaya watched from a platform above the landing field. Ash stood beside her. What do they want? He asked. Choice, Kaya said. She had become the kind of leader who could say one word and make it weigh what it needed to. They heard us, Ash said softly. They felt us, she said. Felt what fire feels like right before it burns and called it a theorem anyway. Maybe that's enough. She sent a reply, pictures of bread, a song about a river, blueprints spooned into math. The envoy tilted, considering, it folded, it left. Later, on the ridge above the broken sea, Ash and Kaya sat and said nothing for an hour. When he spoke, Ash's voice was raw. Do you think we made them less? He asked. By making them more like us. Kaya shook her head. No, we asked them to carry a little weight. We asked them to share the load. That's not less, that's together. Will they? He asked. Some, she said. Some will run, some will stay. That's true of us too. They watched a meteor cross a wrong sky and wished together without telling each other the wish. Years became stories, stories became laws, laws became muscle memory. People still died, people still made babies, people still fought over lines on maps and then erased those lines on the days when the storms came and they needed each other more than their pride. Ash married a mechanic who snored like poetry. Kaya did not marry. She carried a ship's voice in her pocket, and that was enough. The archive grew. A boy who had never seen Earth brought his little sister to the spoons and said, "These are our inheritance." And she nodded solemnly and licked one when no one was looking, because that is what children do when faced with something sacred. They test if it tastes like anything. An old woman who had once been a girl in a shelter on Farron's Reach sat in the shade of a tree that had learned to live in the wrong soil and hummed a lullaby about a river she had never touched. Children played nearby, a Jarine child among them. His skin gleamed. His eyes were wide. He ran and fell and laughed when a human hand helped him back to his feet. There are pictures. Don't ask who took them. Sometimes the world remembers itself. One last battle, not a war, a seed of one. At the edge of a Blackwater nebula, a Jarine remnant started eating again because not all children listen, and not all elders admit they were wrong. They took a mouthful of a station where people taught plants to pretend to be obedient, and sometimes the plants did and sometimes they didn't. Kaya went. Ash stayed to hold the city steady because that is also a kind of going. The promise slid toward the remnant and the Valkyrie's voice rode in her bones. Steady, Kaya said, and the pilot steadied. The scream tried an old trick with new dressings. It brought images of failure and asked them to wear those like uniforms. Kaya said no. The promise opened her heart, light, heat. Memory of a woman's hand on glass, the remnant shook. Kaya sent a message, not words. Wait, run. The remnant turned to go. Not far, she said. Not forever, only until you can come back without needing to eat what you do not understand. It left. The station exhaled. Plants misbehaved. People laughed, cried, cleaned. On the trip home, the stars stretched like linen on a line. Kaya slept. She dreamed of a kitchen with blue cabinets and a tree outside the window and someone singing while cutting an orange. And when she woke, her face was wet and she did not wipe it dry, because some salts are how you carry the ones you can't carry any other way. Decades. Ash's hair went white around the edges in a way that made him look like an illustration in a very old science book about the first men to swallow fire and call it friend. He built towers that spoke to each other through storms. He taught grandchildren to solder and to say sorry like they meant it. Kaya's hands grew the lines of star maps. She brought ships home. She watched the horizon as if a woman could keep it from blinking if she tried hard enough. One sunset that was the wrong color and therefore perfect, they stood on the ridge again. "We did it," Ash said, surprised. "No," Kaya said, smiling. "We're doing it. Difference matters." He nodded, and that nod was a house, a field, a school, a ship, a future. Below them the city glowed, voices carried. A Jareen boy and a human girl argued about rules to a game neither of them had actually agreed to yet, and somehow the disagreement held like friendship. Above, satellites blinked. One of them was older than all the others put together. It was small and very tired and carried in its memory a file labeled home that took up more space than it should have. The Valkyrie spoke gently. "I have been listening," she said. "You are noisy." Kaya laughed. "We learned that from you." "Perhaps," the ship said, a pause. "Commander, your heart rate is elevated. You should eat." Kaya finished, and the word was a kiss for a ghost. "I know." They went down toward the lights. They did not hurry. There are days when you don't have to. Far out, deep in black, something watched the little world roll along its wrong axis. Not an enemy, not exactly a friend. Something with memories of cold calculus and new tastes on its tongue. It took a measure. It turned. It swam away. The stars went on being terrible and beautiful. People went on being terrible and beautiful. Every now and then someone said the word run and meant mercy. Every now and then someone said the word home and meant all of us. The war of silent stars never got a parade. No band can survive that long a march. But the children grew up. They made bread. They put spoons in hands when the lights turned red and the ship shook and someone needed a talisman. The galaxy learned, not in a day, not in a treaty, in 1,000 acts of stubborn gentleness and unyielding love. Mara Solon did not live to see it, but she had not needed to. You don't plant in spring because you expect autumn to ask your permission. On certain nights, when the wrong wind blows the right way, if you stand by the archive doors and close your eyes, you can hear a voice that is not wind and not machine and not quite memory. "Steady," it says, and you are. The cubs cried when she fell. Then they turned to the enemy and growled, "Run." And the dark for once listened. And that day the galaxy learned humanity doesn't conquer, it endures. Headphone, if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more epic HFY sci-fi tales. Until next time, stay human, stay unbroken.